Alright, so today is going to be the part 2 of setting PFsense up. This has been a long time coming. I actually recorded this way earlier, part 2. I lost all of the audio of it, so I'm doing a little bit of a voiceover as well as a couple of extra explanations while I have the time. So, just a little breakdown. Part 1 was setting up the PFsense box, so have like the 5-way WAN ports and the 1 LAN port all set up properly. Part 2 is going to be having those connected to the actual um, LAN switch. So all the boxes are going to be connected to the LAN switch so it goes through the firewall rather than just out to the internet as normal. And then part 3 is, of course, setting up firewalls, which is already up. It's posted. It's part 3, same channel and everything. So today, we're doing part 2, and we're going to move the boxes onto the LAN switch. So we're going to make sure like this kind of physical wire here, even though it's not physical, it's still set up that way in the virtual environment that we're in. So we're going to move that to connect to the LAN switch. We're going to change these IP addresses here because right now they are these addresses. They need to be these 10.0.0.10, which is basically just a private address rather than a public facing one. We're going to need to change a bunch of networking settings, such as setting the proxy, setting a default gateway, setting the DNS servers. There's going to be two actually. One of them is going to be the Active Directory box, and the other is going to be 199.100.16.100, which is just how the environment for this competition is set up. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, getting started right away, we're going to go onto the Active Directory box, and you can see over here this network adapter section under hardware. So you can see on the PFsense box, it has one that's on this CDC Team 10 internal DVS, and that's basically the switch that the LAN is on. Everything else is on the public network, the competition network. So we're going to switch this Active Directory box here. We're going to switch all of them from competition network just to the internal network here. So if you go into VM hardware, I believe you go to settings. You go up to settings and you're go to actions, edit settings, and you're going to scroll down to network adapter there. You're going to browse and you're going to select just the very top one, usually 0. Whatever one that you set your firewall to. So we're going to do this on all the boxes, IRC, Active Directory. We're just going to run through and do that quick. You can see on screen here what buttons I'm pressing. We're going to do that real fast. This is going to make sure that it's like kind of physically wired, so you know in like a real environment you have like your router, you have everything plugged into. Well, this is plugging into the same router. It's called a switch really, but it's all making sure it's plugged into the same one so that internet access goes through the firewall rather than directly to the internet. So we're gonna change all the network settings on the Active Directory box. So we're gonna open this, send the Control Alt Delete, type in the password, which should be CDC if you're doing the competition. Make sure to change those default passwords, everyone. But we're gonna go through here. We're just gonna wait for this to start up a little bit, and we're immediately going to go down into our network settings. I think we're going to open up Edge real quick. We're going to test, like you can see, I type in Google here, and nothing quite happens. Absolutely nothing happens. The internet's not working because we switched it to a different switch. So we're going to go into network settings here. Just don't mind my rambling. I thought I had audio recording here, so I was doing a little bit of explaining, but obviously that is not happening. In Windows, you have to actually sometimes go to Control Panel, and we're going to find our way there here in just a second. So we go to the search bar, we're going to type in Control Panel. Yep, you can see me start to figure it out. Control Panel. We're going to go down to Network and Internet, and we're going to go down to Network Internet Options or Network and Sharing Center. And we're going to go down to set up a new connection network or change adapter settings. Yeah, just change adapter settings. We're going to go down to select Ethernet 0. This is going to be its connection to that LAN switch. And we're going to go to properties. And in these properties, we're going to check Internet Protocol version 4, TCP/IPv4. Very important you click on that one. We're going to go to properties. In here we can change the IP address, default gateway, and DNS servers. So first thing first, we're going to change the IP address. Obviously it's the Active Directory box, so we're going to change it just to 10.10.0.0.10. So 10.0.0.10. Make sure the subnet mask stays 255.255.0. And we're going to change that default gateway to 10.0.0.1. So we're going to come down here just a little bit and change that from whatever it is currently, 6.87.159.254, and change it to 10.0.0.1. You can see me going over here, and that is going to be the IP address of the LAN. So the LAN is going to be the default gateway. It's basically, you can see me with this diagram here, that's going to be where all the traffic is routed through. So rather than going straight to the internet, it goes through the firewall where we can have all our fun firewall settings take place and block traffic that we don't want. You can see me just writing out a little bit of a diagram there. It is whatever you have your firewall LAN IP set to. And on this one, we're going to have two DNS servers, but we're going to make sure rather than 10.0.10 for the first one, we're going to do 127.0.0.1. That is because we need a primary and a secondary. The primary is going to be the Active Directory, and the secondary is going to be that address we found from the wiki there, which is going to be our like main DNS server for the scenario. So we're going to set that as the alternate, and that's just going to be mainly for internet access. So if you type in Google, that's how it knows that Google is whatever Google's IP address is by going through that DNS server. We're going to poke around just a little bit here, show off the wiki. Then we are going to type that in. Hopefully. Nope, we're going to poke around a little bit more. Yep. 199.100.16.100. If I seem to remember it. Yep, 0.100. 0.3128. That's going to be used for the proxy later. But yeah, we got our DNS settings set. That's all good. That's great. That's awesome. So we got that. We're like 90% done with this box. But as you can see, we cannot access the internet yet. So what are we missing? We are missing the proxy settings. So the proxy is what it's going to go through for internet traffic. So we're behind the firewall now. We're behind DNS. If we're saying, hey, what's the name of this, we're going to use that for the name of things. However, we're not actually routing certain traffic through the internet. So we use, because of the setup of IA Ice Age, we're going to use a proxy server, which is going to be 199.100.16.100 colon 328. We're going to use that proxy server to access the internet here. And as you can see, it's already set up on here, but make sure you go into network settings, scroll down to proxy, and we're going to use that. So now that we have that set, you can ignore those Internet Explorer prompts. That's just Internet Explorer being Internet Explorer. We are going to try and test our internet connection. I believe the way are we going to do it? We're going to try to ping something. So we can ping our 10.0.0.1, which means that we can ping our actual PFsense firewall. We can ping our firewall, but we cannot quite yet ping 199.100.16.100. So we're going to try to go down to troubleshooting, because it looks like I was having trouble here. And we can ping gateway, we can't ping proxy, and we can't update. So let's make sure, yep, we can still ping gateway. I'm going to try to ping the default gateway. So it looks like I can ping that default gateway, which means we are not quite set up properly. So we need to, I think what we need to do here is actually set up PFsense. So we're going to have to actually open up a browser here, and we're going to have to set up the basic, so there's a thing called a wizard, and it's just going to set up PFsense basically. So we're going to HTTPS 10.0.0.1. I believe we're going to have to make an exception in the proxy settings here. But basically what we're trying to do is access the web console for PFSense. So we have that box already set up, and we already set up all like the things and everything. But now we actually have to set up the firewall through a little bit of we're gonna have to actually like set up everything properly. You can see you're poking around the settings. I'm just looking for proxy settings, like specific Windows Explorer. Certain browsers will use their own proxy settings, and we might be able to bypass that. But on the Active Directory, I am eventually going to find the proxy settings, and I'm going to create an exception for 10.0.0.1 because we do not want to route through the proxy through that. We want to go straight to our own local network. So I'm going to go to settings. You can see me messing around a little here. I don't know why I'm poking around there. I probably got bored. And sorry for the little bit of unprofessionalism for this video. The editing process is a little bit more complicated because I'm having to do a voiceover, and I don't have much of a process at this point. But we're gonna try to look in proxy server settings. We have it set to bypass for local, but that's not exactly working for some reason. We're gonna have to specifically set an exception within the proxy settings. So once I finally make my way over to the gear on the bottom. Alright, so now that we're here, we're gonna manually set an exception in the proxy settings. So we're gonna put in that exception table there, we're going to put 10.0.0.1. This is going to just make sure it doesn't try to use a proxy. And of course, because it's Windows, we're going to click off and click back on just to make sure it actually saved, because we don't really trust Windows. And now that we're there, we can see, hey, look, we're on a problem with website security. We've actually navigated to our admin console here. So we're going to click on that, continue this website. I'm just going to poke around a little. We're going to continue this website, and we're going to put in the password. The default password should be admin, and the password is password. You can see that here. Oh, the password is PFSense. You can see that. You can always just Google that. That's always going to be the same when you're first setting up PFSense, because it is, of course, open source. So we're going to set that up. We're going to type in the password PFSense there and sign in. And immediately when we sign in, we're going to be hit with a setup wizard. That's going to ask us to set up everything. So we're going to run through this. We're going to click next. And it's really important to do this wizard before you're able to connect to the internet, because otherwise there's certain routing table things that just aren't set up by setting it up on the PFSense box itself. You have to use the admin console. We're going to run through this wizard. Next, click next here. There we go. Click next again. That's just talking a little bit about PFSense itself. And we're going to set up the host name. So host name, the firewall is going to be PFSense, and our domain is actually going to be our team name, because that's what we want our team name to be. So we're going to set our domain to, for me, it was team10.isucdc.com. You're going to have a different number, and you can see here, I'm going to check the wiki for just what that domain name is going to be exactly. It's just going to be team, whatever your team number is, www.team.isucdc.com. Okay. So we're going to go here, change that domain name, team10.isucdc.com, which is just that I was just team 10. That's going to be different for whatever team you're on. We're going to set our DNS server, which is, of course, going to be 10.0.0.10, because that is our Active Directory. And then our secondary is going to be 199.100.16.100. And the reason we have our primary DNS server set to our Active Directory rather than the one that's actually for the internet and whatnot is because our Active Directory is a domain controller, and the domain controller handles some naming stuff. So it uses its domain services to control a little bit of essentially it uses the domain controller to coordinate which machines it has registered underneath it, because it is domain linked, it's going to use a couple of those. Um, but that's kind of niche information. You'll find that out if you're curious. But we're going to set the time server here. We're going to select our WAN interface. So we're going to have everything be static. We don't set a MAC address, don't set MTU, don't set MSS. We don't care about that. And we are just going to go to the static IP configuration. As you can see, it's already set up because we did that in part 1 on the actual box itself. But alternatively, you could set it up through here. I just prefer not to. But all that's already set up. We have our subnet mask, our IP address. Upstream gateway is not set up, however, and we are going to set that to x.x.x.254 or otherwise 6.87.195.254. The 6.87.159 is just what my team was assigned this competition. It was going to be different for you. That is just going to be your like public IP space, and then 254, pretty much always. And as you can see, I'm just talking about these other settings here for a second. They're not really important. DHCP we're not using, PPOE we're not using, all that stuff is not being used. And you can see here referencing 6.87.159.254. That is just going to be our default gateway, which is, in other words, our upstream gateway. The terminology gets thrown out a little bit, but all that's important is remember that's where all the traffic that is not within the network is going to go before it gets to the actual internet. So we're going to then configure our LAN interface, which is of course going to be 10.0.0.1. We've already set that there. That's already good. 24 is fine. Now we're going to change the admin password. You're going to set your own admin password. I'm going to clip ahead here. You're going to have to set your own admin password. Don't try to have my admin password basically, but you're going to use your own admin password. Make sure you document it. It's really important to have this stuff recorded somewhere so that your fellow teammates can reference it. Or if like you're in a company, they usually have a thing called a secret server, which handles secrets or otherwise passwords that are used really importantly. And after that, we're just going to hit next, and we're going to reload the firewall. This is just going to apply all the settings. As you can see, page can't be displayed just because it's reloading. And I believe we're just going to re-navigate to the firewall. You can see there it's just going to reset. Looks like it reset okay, so we're just going to go back to it, which we can just refresh there. Congratulations, now configured. Hooray. So we're going to click finish there, or check for updates. I'm not sure if they're... well, I guess we'll just wait for the recording, but I'm not sure if there's actually an update that needs to be done at the moment. But usually you would check for updates just to make sure you have the latest version, though I'm pretty sure they do have the latest version. As always, as in security and whatnot, having the latest update is really important because they usually fix security issues, and that's what we care about in cybersecurity. So yeah, we're just going to click finish down there. And I believe we're actually going to that's just the EULA. You can just accept that, close out, optional user survey, whatever. It's open source. They like to promote their stuff. We are going to go to interfaces now, and we're going to go to WAN. And this is just making sure that our default gateway key is correct. We know the IP addresses of our WAN ports are correct, but we want to make sure our upstream gateway is selected as 254. So we're going to go to that. It's going to make sure that is 6.87.254. And now that we've done that, we're actually going to test with the command prompt. As you see, we can actually ping our proxy server now. And I believe if we try to access Google or just any internet access at all, we will be able to. And that's because it is going to go upstream through whatnot and access the internet. And I'm going to make sure you make a snapshot on your PFsense here. Those settings are not stored on the Active Directory box. They're stored in the PFsense box because obviously that is you're just accessing the admin console for the PFsense box on the Active Directory. It doesn't matter which one you do it from. You are just accessing the admin console. So that's going to change settings on the PFsense box. And make sure you just take a snapshot, have some good documentation here. Obviously, as always, I really clamor about having really good documentation. It's really important, especially if you're working with a team, for people to be able to reference other things. We're going to check all the other other WANs, make sure they have the default gateway set. That one's set. Opt1 is set. Opt2 is set. That's good. That's good. And I'm just going to trust that the rest of them are set here. We're not going to quite. We're going to be here later when we're doing port forwarding. In part 3, it's going to be using this a lot. This is where we're going to be setting our actual making sure that services go through our one WAN to like the Active Directory box. I'll explain it a little bit better later, but essentially that's making sure that not only firewall rules are being kept, but that it's going to the correct boxes. But we're going to sit there. I believe the Active Directory box is fully set up. I'm going to test just here, going to google.com, and we're going to wait a little, it's slow. But yeah, as you can see, we can access Google just fine. We have internet access. I even type in internet, just like a little bit of a cheeky little test. We're going to type in internet, and it is going to work just fine. Except it's Internet Explorer, so it sucks. But yeah, if we just click there, there's a lot of prompts. Turn on JavaScript, yeah. Okay, Internet Explorer is really bad actually. So, fun fact of the day. But yeah, we can access the internet just fine on the Active Directory box, which is good. That's what we wanted. So now we are going to just close out of Active Directory box. We don't need it quite yet anymore. And make a snapshot. Make sure you have, of course, make sure you have all your snapshots documented. Very important. We're gonna go through here. You can see here. This is my little documentation page. We have a lot of things. You feel free to copy this format. We found it really useful when we used it, and it's just very explicitly outlining what data did you make a change, what is the goal of that change, what exactly did you change, and was there a snapshot made, and who was the person who made that. Just all those things. A little bit of reminders, information in the documentation as well, just for those who are using it who are not the people who actively put entries in. But yeah, this is really helpful for having documentation, especially with this competition, where it's important to have documentation for every step of the way, because at the end you're gonna have to do white docs, and I guarantee you are not going to remember 90% of the changes you did. You're gonna remember a couple, but not very many. Anyways, we're going to go through here, set our documentation, make sure everything is properly formatted, and whatnot. And we're going to make a snapshot. So we don't need the Active Directory box anymore. We can close that out. But we're going to make a snapshot. I like to call my snapshot the same names as what we do on the documentation, just for like easy sake, and I have the same description just so there's like kind of redundancy built within the documentation. Something I did here that you might not want to do is I took a snapshot after I made changes on the box. So usually it's probably going to be a better idea to make changes or not make a first snapshot just so you have something to go back on, and then start making changes and then go from there. So if for some reason I did that setup and I messed something up catastrophically, I would not have had a backup, so that would have been really bad. So on the IRC, obviously we can see that's moved to the internal switch. We're going to log in here. This is going to be a Ubuntu Linux box. This is going to be one with a GUI, which means it's going to be kind of similar to Windows, where we can click around and stuff, and we cannot just use the command prompt here. But we are still going to use command prompts because command prompt is universally good. So we're going to log into the box here. And I think the first thing we're going to do is change our IP address. So we're going to go down to the terminal here. And I think we're just going to check what we have. Something about this box actually was there was a little bit of vulnerability placed on it. So every time the terminal was launched, it tried to run a program. So that's why we're having a little bit of issues here. It's because there was vulnerabilities put in place. But if you ever have a program running, just hitting Control Z or Control C. Control C is going to quit out of whatever process is running. So you can see here, Sudo is trying to run here, it looks like, and that's not very good. So we're just going to fail the password attempts because we do not want sudo to run here. But that was just a little bit of vulnerability left in for the competition. So here we're gonna try to just figure out where we are. Yeah, here I'm talking about that .bashrc is where that sudo is located. As you can see, shadow file is open and readable. That was a part of the vulnerability. It got a little bit more complex as the competition continued. Um, but you can see here, sudo is taking a while. The reason for that is because it's not domain connected. But sudo is taking forever to just do stuff. So we're gonna try to get sudo to run here. Usually Linux is good and it is not usually this slow, especially with the terminal. But obviously there's vulnerabilities left in place by the white team that are meant to make your life harder. Yeah, so we're just gonna try to access .bashrc here, mostly just to show you, the viewer, where exactly this vulnerability is located. There's a little bit more to it than the bashrc. If I believe there was a systemctl, if I remember correctly, there was a systemctl service that was running that continually basically gave shadow up like for free, which is not very good. But in bashrc, that's like what runs every time the terminal launch up. You can see a bunch of code. But we can see here, systemctl restart wall.service. And that wall.service was actually the program that was giving up our shadow file, which is not good. And the reason for it being really slow on startup was because it was trying to run sudo. And sudo, when it's not domain connected, it gets really, really slow. Sometimes it's just for the environment that had set up here. But yeah, we can see there obviously a vulnerability there. Make sure to write that down, folks, in your documentation. Like services, quote unquote, that control it. So we're gonna try to identify there. Usually you can like Google, hey, how do I check this? Or hey, which services are there? Here I believe it's going to be Network Manager or otherwise NetPlan, I believe. And yeah, it's gonna be Network Manager. Because it is Ubuntu, it's going to use Network Manager, and that's just a convention, whatnot. But we're going to figure out the adapter name by typing in nmcli device. So we see netplan ends 192, which essentially means we're running through netplan, which is one layer, and then we also have Network Manager, I believe. But here we're going to check sudo ls etc/netplan. And this is going to, you see there, Network Manager. It's going to be where the stuff is. We're going to ls there, but we can see that those are available. We're going to change it to cat just because we want to view what's in there. Network Manager. That's going to be the file which is going to have our network settings. It's going to take a second because sudo is taking a hot minute here. I would recommend, if you are able to, you can actually do this through the GUI pretty simply. So if you go to the top right there and you see that like question mark with like the Ethernet adapter, that's like the network settings for Ubuntu for the GUI specifically. So if you really wanted to, you could go through there and change all of your network settings just fine. But we're going to go through the command line here because we have to do the command line for other boxes. Let's enter the password. It's obviously going to be CDC. And this is like the setting for Network Manager. And we can see here it just says render Network Manager. Or how to change network settings using Network Manager. We're going to ask that. Alright. So we're going to change our network settings using Network Manager. So system and network D. What am I typing in here? Oh, I'm just listing out the possible network, like actual configures. So there's like system D, and there's like network D, and then there's netplan, and then there's network manager. Usually if there's network manager, there's also netplan, but netplan has like an option to just like override itself and use network manager. That is that renderer line there. It'll say renderer whatnot. it'll say renderer, I believe, network manager if it is using network manager. And here in this IRC box, we're gonna have it. We're just gonna wait for it to load up a little bit here. Sudo is obviously, you can see it like unable to identify domain, and that's because it's trying to use domain stuff. But here, this is actually, the render is actually going to be networkd. So we're not going to have to use nmcli quite as much. We are actually going to be able to just edit this file directly. And that is because that render networkd, doesn't matter if network manager is installed. If it's not set to network manager, it is going to try and use it, networkd. So we're going to edit this file here. Sudo nano etc netplan 00 installer config.yaml. This is the config. The format here is really specific, so just try to make sure you're matching the format up with what I have here. There's not a lot of situations where the format's going to be any more complicated. So like, if you have just one address, you just get rid of the comma. If you have two addresses, obviously you can see there's like the brackets and the comma. If a networkd, you can see here, I'm checking, hey, what does it mean if the networkd is set as a render in netplan? So that's just saying, hey, what's the service responsible for managing that? And that is not network manager. So we're not going to be using network manager, which is great because network manager is a little bit annoying. It works pretty well, but I just personally don't really like to use it. But we see there it's set to networkd. But we're going to go down. We're going to change the address here. Rather than like that Windows prompt we had earlier, we're going to change the network address here. And this is going to be 10.0.0.50. That is just the scenario we have. The gateway 4 is going to be our PFsense box, the LAN address. So it's going to be 10.0.0.1 as always. And our name servers here, we don't need to change 199.100.16.100. We just need to change it to 10.0.0.10. You can see me kind of moving around in the boxes there. Yep, so we're just going to change this 10.0.0.10. That's all good and dandy. 199.100.16.100. That is just the scenario, what the primary DNS server, or not primary, secondary DNS server is. So we got those all changed. Now we're going to try to ping our 199.100.16.100. That is not going to work. So just as before, we need to have our proxy settings set. You can see there, destination host unreachable. Actually, I see. So initially, when you do changes in netplan, so when you change that file, you're actually going to have to apply the changes. So netplan has system service. We're just going to restart that. That's not going to actually be the fix. We're going to have to do sudo netplan apply. We're going to restart network here. Network online target. That's just what's saying, hey, we are online. We are good to go. We are connected to the internet. We're going to restart that so it tries to reconnect. But you can see, you're actually able to see the IP address in there. You can see it doesn't actually apply. And it's going to take me a little bit here to realize that we need to run the command sudo netplan apply, but we are eventually going to do that. So I think we're going to do it next here. Yeah, I'm going to check the status of network online target. So that means that we're going to have to do sudo netplan apply because we need to actually apply the changes. Yeah, you can see network is aligned. Stopping network is online. Reach target network is aligned. All fine and dandy. When you're in there, you can always hit Control-C just to leave that. That's a little Linux fun fact. ifconfig, you can see I'm going to check here. It's still set to 6.87.159.50, which means it hasn't applied. So I believe, yeah, I'm just going to Google, hey, how do I actually apply the network changes with netplan? How to apply, yep, how to apply network settings. Sudo I'm going to wait for ChatGPT here. Generally speaking, I don't really like condoning the use of ChatGPT in a lot of areas, but networking and cybersecurity is one of those where it's quite helpful. A lot of cybersecurity is relying on your knowledge, your general knowledge, and your how good you can navigate to documentation. And what ChatGPT helps with is just finding where that documentation might be or giving you an idea of where it is. Because usually, if you've done it before, which I have here, you remember pretty quickly because I know that pseudo net planning is correct. So it's kind of more of a reminder here. But just be wary of trusting like ChatGPT with all your answers because it is not necessarily going to have all of them, but it's really good at answering really specific questions in that regard. It's good to check your understanding a little bit. We're going to go through here. Yeah, so it's just a step by step. First step is restart, is obviously going to netplan to that file and changing the settings. The second step is going to sudo netplan apply. And the third step is, of course, restarting the systemctl service. Or just restarting. You could just restart the entire machine here after doing network plan.apply, but we don't need to. We're just going to restart network D. Yeah, you can see the what's getting that results here is when I press tab in Linux, it's going to try to autocomplete. And if I keep pressing tab multiple times and I have more than one option available, it's going to show like all the options available. So as you can see there, it had quite a lot of options available. And if we restart it and check our ifconfig, the IP address has changed to 10.0.50, which is good. That's behind our firewall. That's what we want. So now I think we're going to test it here. We're going to ping 199.100.16.100, and we're going to get feedback from that. That's great. And there's another thing that we're going to have to do, which I believe is already done for us, and that is our actual proxy settings. So proxy settings in Windows or in Linux is a little bit different from Windows. We have to actually change it through local variable or environment variables, which are a little bit different. And I think here we're going to try to access the internet through Firefox. Should work. Yep, it's going to work here because we do have proxy settings set correctly just by default, but usually they're not. I think I'm going to test that here in just a second. Let's the footage roll a little. How to check proxy settings. Yep, so I'm going to look that up because I do not remember the exact syntax. I think it's etsy slash, yeah, you can see setting the proxy settings in there. That's how you're going to set it. There's kind of two steps to keeping the proxy settings. One is actually running those commands, and the other is using editing sudo. Oh, yeah, we can see here we're going to echo HTTP proxy. That should point to http://199.100.16.100:3128. That is just going to be what our proxy is for HTTP traffic. So when we access the internet and it's not secured because it's HTTP, we are going to use that protocol and we're going to use that proxy. So we're going to go through the internet through that route. It's a little bit of networking. So we can see here, note that environment variables will not persist across reboots. So we're going to need to edit sudo etsy/profile. So sudo nano/etsy/profile. And this file is going to be, it's going to run, I believe, every time on startup. So we're going to make sure that in here, we can see that it's actually set in here. The only three lines we care about here is export HTTP proxy, export HTTPS proxy, export FTP proxy. Those are not normally there. They were graciously provided to us by the competition. Make sure you have those there. It is really important that you have those proxy settings in place. Otherwise, you will not be able to access the internet. We're going to poke around here. I believe I'm explaining a little with the voiceover or with no audio that I have on this recording. We're just going to wait just a little bit. All right. We are now going to edit sudoers. So this sudoers is going to normally it resets environmental variables, and that's what's going to actually change that in the sudoers file. But we can see defaults environmental keep. Oh yeah, that's a vulnerability. all no password, all. That's really bad. That means everybody can run sudo, which means everybody has root access, which is a security vulnerability, and we are going to remove. I believe I documented right after this, but we are going to. That's not what we're looking for in this file. We're looking for this defaults env underscore keep plus equals HTTP proxy, HTTPS proxy, FTP proxy. Something about sudo is that the formatting is really important in sudo. So as you can see, the formatting, make sure it follows that really closely. If you do sudo v sudo, so sudo vi sudo, run that command, or visudo, it's in that wiki there. You can see it above that defaults line. Uh, that's gonna open sudoers. It is gonna make sure that like you don't make any syntax errors. So it's just gonna be like a little bit of a helper. Make sure you don't use it. So yeah, we don't need to make changes. We're gonna say no, which is end. I accidentally made a change there. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, IRC box, everything, network settings completely set up. I believe we're just going to do a little bit of documentation here. So we're gonna run that. We're gonna make a snapshot, or I might forget to do it here. I do it later, I promise. Make sure you do snapshots. Make sure you take documentation. If you have any sort of virtual environment where you have virtual machines, use snapshotting software as much as you can, because it is really, really, really valuable, especially when you mess up things, especially when you're learning how to do stuff. Okay. Yeah. So this is gonna be another Windows box here to put behind the firewall. I believe this is going to be a little bit simpler than, or no, it's not really going to be simpler. It's going to be a little bit easier because we've already done the Windows. However, we are also going to have to log in as an administrator on here, because this CDC user, I'm pretty sure, is not set as an administrator, and that is bad because we are going to need to access. Oh, you can see here. We're going to take the snapshot. But yeah, we're going to need to be on administrator on the jelly box here, just because we need to change proxy settings. And for some reason, this is something I really hate Windows for, but for some reason you have to be an admin to change proxy settings on Windows. And it doesn't tell you. Really, really importantly, it does not tell you that you have to be an admin. You can make the change. You can be like, oh yeah, I've made the changes. And you can click off, and you can go right back to it, and it is not going to change. Yeah, but regardless, you can see there's a bunch of stuff on the screen. This is just a competition this year. We had a Clippy. He's a little fun guy. We had to set him up and everything. And we're just going to change network settings. So we can navigate. I believe we're going to try to navigate through here. I'm going to change the proxy settings first, where I'm going to find out we need to be an administrator. So yeah, type in all the settings you want. This is going to fail in just a second. I'm going to hit save. It's not going to save. I promise you, I click save. It's not going to save. You can see there, we go there and back. And this is where I'm going to realize, oh, hey, we need to be an administrator, which is not fun. Yep, we're going to hit save. We're going to hit save a lot, and it is not going to do anything. Just me a little bit of double checking, make sure I have it set. I'm going to be a little bit confused here because I don't quite remember just yet that we need to be an administrator. Because usually the CDC user is an administrator by default, just because the competition likes to make things a little bit easier, a little bit harder, just because the CDC user and administrator, that means that the attackers can run things as an administrator much easier. Regardless, we are going to switch user. Or we can do the other network settings first. Yeah, I think we're going to do this. So we're going to go to network and internet, control panel, network and internet, network and sharing center, going to the Ethernet there, going to the IPv4 settings, and properties. And we're going to change this to 10.0.0.20. Make sure the subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. And we're going to set the default gateway to 10.0.0.1. That is going to be our LAN. And of course, preferred DNS server 10.0.0.10, and the alternate DNS server is 199.100.16.100. You can see that all written out in the video here. Make sure that abides by that. We got that set. As you can see, hey, do you want to allow your PC? So it's going to discover the internet here in just a second. It knows we actually have internet access because it has the default gateway. It is just that there are no proxy settings set up quite yet. So we are going to change to an admin here soon, I think. Yeah, this is me a little bit explaining. The wiggling of the mouse usually indicates I'm talking, even though, of course, I'm not able to. But yeah, we can see we can't access the internet because we don't have proxy settings set. We're going to actually troubleshoot here. We're going to go to command prompt, and we're going to try to ping our 199.100 by 16.100. It is going to reply, which means we do have like all the routing stuff set. It's just that proxy settings are not set correctly. Yeah, we can ping our gateway. Works fine. Works great even. But yeah, we're going to switch user. Go to CC, switch user. And we want to be local admin. So the local admin username is by default administrator. You can always do // or is that // Yeah, that's // No, it's // Anyway, it's the / is right above the enter key because there's two /. That's the yeah, that's the /. But / administrator, that is going to be the username, and on this scenario the password was CDC. Might be different from you. If you're Ice Age, it's probably going to be CDC. You should be able to know that through the scenario document and such. But yeah, we're going to log in as administrator. It's going to take a while because, of course, it does. I think I'm going to ramble just a little bit here while I wait for that to load. But we're in. That's great. Hi, Clippy. We're going to go over here. Yet again, we're just going to go straight to proxy settings. We're going to use a proxy server 199.100.16.100.3128. Don't use proxy server for local internet addresses. Save. We're going to click off, click back on, and the settings have saved. Hooray. Now we're going to just go to Microsoft Edge just to test our internet connection here. We're going to say, hey, internet, do you have access? Type in the internet. Are we going to? We are. We have internet. How really, really exciting. Exciting news. So that is our Jellybox setup. We're going to take a snapshot there. Internet settings configured or set or whatever. We're just going to make sure we're documenting correctly. Yet again, a lot of this is a lot of, I guess you could say grunt work, but it's a lot of making sure that, hey, is proxy set, is DNS server set, is the default gateway set, are these all set correctly, is the IP address correct? Great, yes, yay, it works. But here we're going to have on the Ubuntu, on another Linux machine, we are going to have to set our network settings through entirely command line. So that's why I did command line earlier, just because we're going to also have to do it here. But we can see we don't have NMCLI, so this is a little bit older version of Linux on the NAS machine. This is going to be a much older version of Linux. IPL is not going to work. NMCLI isn't going to work. So we're going to say, hey, how to check what version of Linux this is. Or, what is in charge of IP address on a Linux machine. Yep, so we want to know what service is actually in charge, so we know what commands we need to run, just so we could set everything correctly. So IP doesn't look like it exists as a command. Oh, no, it does. IP address show. Yep. So we can see that's what our IP address is set to, 6.87.155.30, I think. But we don't actually want to set to that, so we're going to have to change that. So IP address show, that's just going to be the interface. So ENS192 is going to have that. So we don't have network manager. I don't know if we have network playing quite yet. We're going to check just now. Um, systemd/network. We're going to try to run this command here. It doesn't look like it's going to succeed. Um, Regardless, we're going to look here. We're going to figure out which renderer is in charge. And we want to, I think we're going to actually figure out which version specifically this Linux is on. Yeah, so we're going to check what's in systemd/network. Here we're just going to be like kind of looking around. I'm trying to figure out what exactly is the renderer, but you can see my process. I'm going to say, hey, which version is it? How to check what network manager is in charge. And then from there, once we know which network manager, we can do specific things for that. So we know that we need to change like the IP address, the proxy settings. But yeah, it's going to be Ubuntu 16.0.4.7, which is going to be quite the old version of Linux. This is pretty old because like I think it's 2016 is which version that it's in. But we're going to look at, hey, how to check network for Ubuntu 16.0.4. So we can check IP address by IP address show, which we already succeeded with earlier. We can see IP route. We can see network interfaces. DNS settings are etcresolve.conf. Good to know, good to know, good to know. So we're going to navigate to network, such as you said, network/interfaces. This is like the oldest way, I believe, to do kind of the networking stuff, or do network settings for a Linux machine. It's just a really old version of Linux. There, I was just figuring out where exactly that was. So we're going to be navigating to etsy/network/interfaces. We're going to do a sudo nano/etsy/network/interfaces, and we're going to set these settings in here. So we're going to set the gateway to 10.0.0.1. We're going to set the address to 10.0.0.30. Keep the net mask, and we're going to set 2 DNS name servers. I believe we're going to do that here. We need to eventually. I'll probably show a snippet in if I don't show it here. Write that file. I only set 1 DNS server. We're going to need to set 2. We're going to do that probably a little bit later. But you're going to need to set, obviously, just as always, you're going to see set both 10.0.0.10 as the Active Directory as the primary name server, and 199.100.16.100 as the secondary DNS server. But we're going to check our DNS settings in etcresolve.conf. You can see me right down there. Yep. If it's going to load. But we're just going to we're going to do a hard reset. So sometimes you're usually able to restart specifically a networking service, and typically that's better because like say you're in like a company and you have a machine, you're gonna have other stuff on it. You don't want to reset everything. But sometimes, especially with the older versions where it doesn't have like a specific service managing it, it's kind of built in. We want to reset the whole thing. So that's kind of why I did that there. And it looks like I did not actually change the IP address. We're going to do ifconfig. Oh, I did. Never mind. But yeah, iNet address 10.0.0.30. It's not updated on VCenter yet because VCenter is bad and slow, but it is going to be updated, which is good. So now now that we've got the IP address, we can start worrying about other things such as our proxy settings and default proxy settings. We already set default gateway. What services might set IP address and how to change. Ensure overwrite. Yep, so I'm going to do a little bit of research here mid-recording. like we can see we refreshed a bunch. And I'm like, oh, it's actually changed. Like really confidently that it's changed now. Because sometimes there is other like multiple services trying to set IP address, and one of them wins out over the other. It's really hard to tell which is which. But yeah, now that we've done that, we're gonna go to Etsy's profile, and we're going to edit that. And as we can see, HTTP proxy is set, HTTPS proxy is kind of set. It's using some interesting formatting. I don't quite like this, mostly because that technically should work, but I find it to be somewhat inconsistent. So I just like to have it explicitly written out for each line. So export HTTP proxy equals HTTP 192.116.100.30128, and same for HTTPS proxy. Make sure it is syntax is correct. Don't want to miss out any lines there. 30128. That's going to be set, and we can Control X, Y, enter to save. So we're going to do echo HTTP proxy. This is just going to check that setting. We can see that's not actually going to be set because we did not restart. HTTP proxy is set because it's already been set by network profile. So Etsy/profile runs every time. I think I've already said this, but it runs every time the machine like starts up, like boots up. So it runs that command. So it sets environmental variables at the bottom there because you're setting that every time the like machine starts up. So you're resetting your environment variables. I'm going to try to go to Etsy/sudoers. It looks like I'm struggling a little bit here. I'm just double checking the spelling of it. We're gonna edit Etsy/sudoers just to make sure that we have that default keep here. This is snapd-config. I'm just checking this. It doesn't look like it's a problem, so I'm not going to edit it. But yeah, we can see down here, we're going to go down, and we can see already it has defaults env_keep plus equal HTTP proxy, HTTP REST proxy, and FTP_proxy. That is good. That is what we need. We're just going to leave that file alone now. And NAS, I believe, is fully set up. We're not even going to test it, I guess. Wow. But yeah, you would test that by, for Linux machines, you would run the command wget google.com. I'll put it on screen here, but this command is basically used to like go to the internet as if you were in a browser and download the first page that URL brings you. So that's going to be a way to like test that. But yeah, so the www is going to be a little bit easier. We're going to be able to do what we did in the IRC machine and use netplan. So we can see right away sudo nano etsy netplan. We have that on there. That is fantastic. We're going to edit that installer config.yml. That's going to take a minute to load. It's going to load. But yeah, we're in etsy/netplan/00/installer-config.yml. You can see at the top of the screen there. We're going to change our address to 10.0.0.40/24, change our gateway to 10.0.0.1, and change our name servers to 10.0.0.10, comma, space, 199.100.16.100. You can see here me here looking at the IRC machine. I'm just checking the formatting. You don't actually need to go over and change anything in this machine. I'm just looking at the format on the syntax just so it's correct, because it does really matter. And if you mess it up, it's not very good. But yeah, there. I'm just checking the syntax. That is correct. 199.100.16.100. Do I forget to? I do. So it looks like I made a little oopsie here. I'll put a little bit of text on the screen. I forgot to change that 6.87.159.10 to 10.0.0.10. I ended up fixing it later in the competition. Don't worry. But yeah, we get to Etsy profile, and we're gonna set our proxy settings here. It's already set for us, it looks like, which is great. But just remember, there's no guarantee this is set for you. So you're just going to have to make sure you set it yourself. That no proxy, it's not very important. That's like kind of the exceptions indicator, and we don't set it up, and we don't really need to, because I mean, there's not much it gets use out of. Um, if we were to access the admin console from this point, we might want to do that, but we do not need to. Sudo nano etc/sudoers just to check to make sure that defaults are kept there. It's gonna take a minute to load. I really hope this video isn't going to be really boring. This is the longest. It is the most kind of grunt work intensive, but it is going to be quite boring, so I apologize for that. So yeah, we're going to do sudo netplan apply. You can see me mistype it a little bit. Um, yeah, so sometimes when you run a command and it's the wrong command, it's going to take a second because it's like, hey, you did a command, but the syntax doesn't make sense. So it's just going to have a fit. So that's why it takes forever. But we're control C there just to cancel it if it did happen to do anything, which it didn't. But yeah, okay. So it's going to sudo netplan apply. It's going to try to run. It's going to apply all the changes we made. So changing the IP address, changing the default gateway, changing DNS settings. Do remember, do not do it the exact same I did on there. I made a mistake. I have it on screen for y'all. So it should be, hopefully don't make the same mistake I did, because I ran netplan apply without sudo. Duh. But yeah, we're going to restart network D, systemd-network D dot service. Restart that. We're going to check its status. IP all is not going to work, but we can do ifconfig. Ifconfig is my beloved. And you can see 10.0.40 is the IP address set in that first line there, right under ENS192. That's going to be good. So sudo nano profile, we're going to edit that, make sure it's correct. It is. That is awesome. Sudo nano etc/sudoers, we're going to make sure that at the bottom here it has defaults environment to keep. Notice here in the sudoers file it says all equal all. That is bad, obviously. So that means that any user can sudo on your machine. Any user can run any command they want, basically. Not very good. But we're just going to test here. You can see the wget google.com ping 100. That's working correctly. It means we have full internet access. We can ping everything. We can access everything. That is fine and dandy. So I believe after I do the snapshot here, that is going to wrap up this video. Thank you all so much for listening to this crappy voiceover. Sorry for losing the audio and taking like 2 months to get this video out. But I was busy, I promise.